There has been numerous accounts of hackers actively changing traffic light systems for fun.
The real-world examples of these attacks taking place often have dangerous consequences.
There is a risk to life. Quite commonplace now for your opportunist hackers to know and understand how they're being hacked. We managed to hack the Wi-Fi network and we were able to change logos and text on their product by the millions, and this was a global entity.
Hello, welcome to the Safer Digital Society podcast. This week we're going to be talking about operational technology, or OT. Now, operational technology used to mean pumps, pipes and presses, but now it means that hackers can basically make your factory do the Macarena. Unfortunately, the real-world examples of these attacks taking place often have dangerous consequences.
There is a risk to life.
There is a risk to life. I'm joined by Stu, who's our resident pen tester, and this week I'm going to be nice to him and just say hello.
Hello, mate. Thank you. And I'm here with Scotty. PowerPoint is his new pen. Help! Hackers have got access to our printing lines, and everything is now being printed with an orange logo. Nice.
Not the worst logo to have, right?
No, obviously not.
So before we get into that scenario, let's just explain what's the difference between OT, operational technology, and traditional IT, or information technology, and what does that look like, so that when we break it down, we've sort of all got an understanding.
So IT is your conventional Windows-based environments, might be Linux-based environments, desktop servers, printers, you name it, normal office kind of based equipment. OT is very different. It's the devices and infrastructure that are connected enough to control machines, pumps, processes, etc., and they are a lot more specialized. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of those technologies rely on the IT network being effective and working, because some of the controllers are based on the IT implementation that hosts the OT environment.
And OT spans a real wide range of technologies, right?
Yeah.
From very basic sensors at temperature, all the way up to complex controllers like SCADA.
Yeah, I mean, so SCADA is a way of machine control. So your robotic arms, your welding machines for cars, or printing presses, that is what controls that machine. From
an incident response background, all the cases we've done that involve OT, there's two distinct types of attack we see. It's either what we call direct, so it's actually affecting the OT technology, or what we see more common is indirect. So an attack that's going on, a controller gets affected, a network gets taken out, but it did actually affect the OT environment. But the OT environment, the hackers went essentially on those boxes.
To simplify that down a little bit, the IT server, client or machine that might be controlling that equipment, if that's taken offline or hacked, there's a good chance that that machine is no longer either going to work or it's going to do something that isn't meant to do, because the process is gone. The line of communications has now changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got IT, we've got OT, and then we've got direct and indirect attacks. And then we'll talk about the sort of threats that do direct and indirect, because it's key to understand that, to then understand what the impact and outcome will be. So when we talk about direct, now the ability to hack an OT environment is actually quite niche, right? The knowledge required to reverse engineer a specific technology, it sits more at sort of that higher level nation state, where they've got that resources to undertake those sorts of campaigns.
Yes, I would agree with that to a degree. It did used to sit at nation state. However, the technologies being used and the protocols that are being used within the direct OT environments is quite commonplace now for your opportunist hackers to know and understand how they're being hacked. So they are targeting them now a bit more specifically. For example, traffic light system.
Yeah.
There has been numerous accounts of hackers actively changing traffic light systems for fun, for pleasure, maybe just messing around, but they have real world consequences against them. Whereas your nation states are trying to change something on a lot larger scale.
Yep.
Power plants, water plants, treatment plants, you name it. That's the effect that they would have, So there is a difference, but essentially as OT grows and matures and becomes that little bit more secure, the legacy kind of stuff is starting to be more known by the more common hacking kind of effect.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's all about that sort of, what do they want to do? So you think impact on OT, like you said, traffic light systems, you could have hospitals, military functions. Mm-hmm. If you're in an asymmetric warfare, or you're a state that wants to have that impact on something to affect those operations, that's what you're going to go after.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas if you're looking from a cybex point of view, from that sort of extortion side of things, you just want to scare someone or control it enough to extract a payment.
Yeah, I mean, there's been numerous accounts of cyber extortion groups, that have infiltrated maybe a factory or production plant and shut it down, so they can't create the product that they're going to create. Or, and the idea there is that they extort money from that entity and then turn them back on, or give them the access to be able to continue their business.
Yeah, and as we mentioned in the beginning, some of these attacks have real dangerous impact, because there's effect to life. I'll tell you a case we did, which was not so serious. I'd say it was a manufacturer. They manufactured a goods. It was a perishable good, so it would go off. And their IT function got hit by ransomware.
Okay.
But the controllers in the warehouse stopped because they were affected by this. And what that meant was the production line stopped. And what they had was this perishable goods that there was no way to remove it from the production line, because the production line should never stop. It wasn't engineered into the machines. So when that's happened, we've had to go through a full recovery process. And part of that wasn't just the technical side of how do we get the systems back up, but it was how do we clear out the product from the factory to get it restarted and go again. So,
although that's not as a serious consequences of loss of life, but there is a serious loss of money. And revenue from that, and time spent. I have a very similar kind of story. I was doing an engagement overseas, and we managed to hack the Wi-Fi network, get into their IT network, and their IT network had access to they're kind of like printers, so mass printers of their product. And we were able to change logos and text on their product by the millions, and this was a global entity. So change on this machine would happen globally, not just in that factory. So there is consequence to it, and it proves that those attacks can happen, but there is also a serious side. That would have cost that company millions of dollars if we'd have done that. Obviously we didn't, because it was a proactive approach to testing their security. But if that was a hacker, they can easily cyber extort that company to get that system back online. And we don't necessarily talk about this a lot of the time, but there is also the impact to the human element of that. The person in control of those systems or looking after the security, how do they feel, after that? But for this, OT environments are vast. They are super complex. They have a lot of moving parts to them. And I think it's only really in the last few years we've really understood the depth and the breadth of security that needs to be placed onto OT networks and OT environments.
Let's talk about that security that needs to be put in, because from a forensics background, I tell you, it's an absolute nightmare. Whereas with your traditional IT, we have put vast amounts of time and money into securing it. We have products like EDR products, network traffic analysis. We have lots of different products we put in.
Asset management systems.
Tools created, and we have understanding of the artifacts. We have understanding of the logs. We can then read them, we can analyze them, and we know what's going on. When we look at OT environments, it's a very wide spectrum. From some OT equipment has some good logging on there. You can pull that off and you can analyze. Some of it has absolutely nothing at all because it's so legacy or so old, or it wasn't designed for that. And so then we get put the challenge of, well, how are we going to monitor, detect, and respond to a threat if the technology we're using doesn't have the capability to give us the data points we need?
I think that's changing though, isn't it? With the new regulations that are coming out from government level all the way down to kind of protocol level, there is now a focus with OT security across the board. I think those changes are now coming into place quite thick and fast. So the ability to get logs, the ability to manage, the ability to reset, the ability to have security in mind, for the protocols and processes that are used, it is starting to be commonplace. And from my world, the kind of pen test world, we are seeing a lot more products that are quite open to saying, hey, look, we need testing. Who wants to test us? Maybe various different conferences, various different programs, bug bounties, stuff like that, that really help scale that up to where they go, okay, we know about these vulnerabilities now.
Building that knowledge base.
And we deploy the next version that's more secure and more secure after that. So
that's awesome. And anyone who's listening who thinks, oh, how is it that things aren't secure? That's not the case. When there is a real serious risk, threat to life, or it's CNI, critical national infrastructure, it is highly regulated. They are putting in the best practices. They do things like micro-segmentation, which we'll discuss in a bit. They are putting stuff in place. Don't want anyone to get too panicked that it's not being secured.
Yeah, I mean, look, for the general person, it's not really a big concern unless they operate and work in those environments, So if they do work at a energy provider, it's a concern. If they work in an engineering firm, it's a concern. If they work at the local corner shop, it's probably not as big a concern as, the other two examples I gave. It's still an effect. If you talk about the supermarket, and there have been recent examples of this where supermarkets have to close down or they can't get the food to each location, it's still a concern. It might be not as big, but it's still a concern along the line.
Goes outside of that. Where's your data to actually what is being affected in your physical reality? So that's the problem. There's some examples of it. What can we do? What are the big things for OT security that we need to put in place now? And then what we need to be developing, what we need to be looking at, how can we make it a better place?
I think currently we are in a really good state of play with OT security. Everything is being examined to the micro level. Unfortunately, a lot of OT was born and integrated at a kind of legacy area, so we're still dealing with that.
Everything becomes legacy eventually.
It's very difficult for any business to keep buying new tech year after year after year after year, but we are seeing that slightly change with more kind of subscriptive programs to the tech that they're buying into. So, if there is an update, they don't have to buy it again. It's just given, So we can, and we are moving forward with that. The risks and the understanding, the asset management, the log profiling, having the right setups and the advisory part to that, to be able to know what you've got, how to protect it, what to look for, it's working. And that's why we have those programs and controls in place.
From a more of a practical point of view of what we do, especially from an incident response side, we talk about segmentation. Everything we do is to identify the problem, contain it, eradicate, recover. So outside of the difficulties of identifying, because there's no log sources, we go, how do we contain OT environments? We talk about segmentation, in particular micro-segmentation. You mentioned there legacy systems. And the problem is you go, well, we haven't built or replaced this OT system yet. There's not another product to put in place, so we have to use the one we've got. And then we go, well, how do we protect the one we've got when it's gone vulnerable, it's out of support, we can't take it away? We say, let's segment it. Let's put a firewall right in front of it and let's allow just the traffic it needs to operate through. And then we can monitor that and we can see if there's any changes in those flows. So micro-segmentation is a real game changer for OT security.
And it is, and it should have always happened from the start, but we weren't there. As an industry, as a tech, we just weren't there.
Yeah. We do it, we call it incident response readiness programs, where we go and look at, you said it, asset register, actually understanding your environment. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges I always hear from clients when we've got OT involved is a sort of how do we know what we've actually got? And what do we class it as, and which systems have X components to? That's a bit of work you have to just go through. Sometimes it's going into the factory, into the site, and sitting there and cataloguing everything you've got, and being honest and going, I don't know what this is, but I'll go find the answer. I'm cataloguing that there's an unknown, and then we can go and deal with it.
Yeah, and it's manual. It's some of it can be automated, some of it cannot. But as soon as you've got that, you understand the full effect of what OT environment you have, and with that, you could put the right things in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming to the end of the episode now. We've covered OT, we covered IT. We've covered those indirect and direct attacks, talked about a couple of the cases that we've worked on. What's the one thing we should take away from this? What's the one thing we need to do within the OT space?
Know what you've got. Do that asset management program. If you are running these kind of environments, make sure you know exactly what you've got and how it's connected. And then from there is a formalized plan that can be drawn up or escalated to really help if you need to micro segmentate an older piece of equipment, or if you've got a new piece of equipment in, you know where it's going and what it's talking to.
You can then start to build that operational resiliency, your instant response plan, your containment plan, your continued operations plan if you need it.
The last thing we want is Steve plugging in a Wi-Fi adapter to that printing press.
Yeah, absolutely. Who knows what he'd print? Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.